Now 3:30. It is 6:30 East Coast time. We have Dr. Anthony Burrow from Cornell University is joining us as our speaker for kicking off our Black History Month speakers lecture series. I'm gonna have us do me a favor and make sure that you're muted. If you have questions for Dr. Burrow as he presents or goes through his presentation, I'm going to ask you all to put them in the chat or wait till after he's done, and we can actually engage in conversation that way as well. My name is Javier Cervantes. I am the Executive Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the Greater Albany Public School District here in the Mid-Willamette Valley, about 90 minutes south, Anthony, of Portland. So to give you a reference point, we're about 20 minutes south of the state capital in Salem. So that just gives you a reference point, because I know you've been to Portland at least once or twice in the past. So Anthony and I, or Dr. Burrow, Anthony and I have worked together for about 3 years over at Loyola University Chicago. Anthony is probably one of the smartest people that I've ever met, and one of the best intellects to get you thinking about or get you reflecting about yourself. And when he was telling me about his research in the past about purpose and identity and how they intersect, I got really excited about at some point being able to invite him to do a presentation wherever I was, whether that be at Lynn Benton Community College when I was there, or here at Greater Albany Public Schools. So I'm really excited to have Anthony here. Dr. Burrow is, as I said, is a scholar and a true intellect in many respects. So I'm gonna read his biography before we get started, and I just want us also to pay attention to some ground rules. Essentially, a couple of them real simple: be respectful of the space, be respectful of other people's opinions, and have good questions. That's some tenets that I want folks to have. All right, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and do a little reading of Dr. Burrow's biography here so we can get started. Dr. Anthony Burrow from Cornell University is the Ferris Family Associate Professor of Life Course Studies in the Department of Psychology, Director of the Bonfenbrenner Center for Translational Research, and the Associate Dean of Outreach and Extensions in the College of Human Ecology. He also serves as the Provost Fellow for the Public Engagement and directs the Purpose and Identity Process Laboratory. Dr. Burrow received his BA in Psychology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and his PhD in Applied Development Psychology from Florida International University. He received his postdoctoral training with the Multicultural Research Institute at the University of Notre Dame. Dr. Burrow is also the director of the Program for Research on Youth Development and Engagement, PRIDE. The aim of PRIDE is to link science and service in innovative ways involving 4-H communities in the basic and applied research to promote positive youth development. Dr. Burrow's research fellow follows two paths. The first investigates why having a sense of direction or purpose in life serves as a psychological resource for those who cultivate it. Specifically, he conducts studies testing the extent to which purpose, A, contributes to positive adjustment, and B, serves as a source of protection in the face of stress and challenge. A second path examines how notions of race are incorporated into one's sense of self, i.e. racial identification, and potentially shapes perceptions of everyday encounters. His work is in the area focused on the psychological adjustments of ethnic minorities and examines A, how race-related experiences are related to adjustments, and B, whether racial identity might either amplify or lessen the impact of these experiences. He believes the importance of his work lies in the potential to self-identify sources of resilience capable of improving the well-being of vulnerable and often marginalized populations. With that brief introduction to Dr. Anthony Burrow, my friend, Anthony. You're muted.
Can you hear me? Wonderful.
We got you. We're
okay.
Good. Yep.
My apologies if my internet, we're having a little bit of a storm coming, and so my apologies if my internet cuts off. Just let me know if I need to change positions, and I'll do my best to find a new spot in the house if it's fine. But so far, am I coming through okay?
So far, so good.
Okay, let me just jump into things, and then we'll make up on the other side. I apologize for having cut off earlier in the middle of the introduction, but it was so neat to be able to hear Javier read a little bit about my bio, given we started together almost a decade ago back at Loyola. This is such a neat connection for me and an honor, Javier, to be invited out to talk with you and your team today. I'm just humbled for this invitation. I know we talked a while ago about making this happen, and I'm glad that you were persistent and made it happen. So I'm honored to be here tonight. And so thank you all for being here and joining me. I think, as was just read, was a little bit about my background. So I won't bore you with details, but I would like to highlight a couple of things. I am a professor of psychology at Cornell University. I am the associate dean of extension and outreach in the College of Community Ecology, which means I work with the extension system. Cornell is the land grant in New York, and we get to work with the extension system. In my work, I connect it to the 4-H program throughout every county in New York State. I'm also the director of the Bronfenbrenner Center, which means in addition to my work, I get to help others connect their work with the communities for whom the consequences matter. So translating their basic laboratory science to the world and making the world fit onto campus, right? Making sure that we're studying things that actually have relevance to what people need and are asking for in their everyday lives. And so those are some roles that I get to play. What they also mean is that all of them are relatively new. I took on these administrative roles in the pandemic, which I would highly recommend not doing. I took on 3 new administrative roles in the pandemic, and things that made sense on Zoom are not making sense as we're going back to in-person. And I can't even make it to all the meetings I have, but there's an honor in having these roles, and I'm appreciative for the chance to have them. One role I want to emphasize, though, as a segue to our conversation today, is I'm also the Provost Fellow for Public Engagement at Cornell, which essentially means I get to work around issues where life on campus is trying to engage with communities outside of campus. And why that role is important for me is because it was in that role that I won an award. And I know that's a bit of a humble brag, but more important than the award was that it came with some money. It came with a big pot of money, so much that I didn't know what to do with it. So I gave it away. And what I gave it away to do was to build a website. It doesn't look like much of one, but it counts as a website, and I called it the Contribution Project. And what I did with the rest of the funds was I put an announcement around campus that said, can you think of a contribution you'd like to make to yourself or to others? If so, tell me about it. And I'll put you in the running for a chance to win $400. That was really all the marketing that I had. Is there something you want to contribute yourself or others? If so, tell me, and I'll put you in the running to win $400. When I did that, I didn't know if I would get 8 or 9 people to apply, or 18 or 19, but I left the website open for 3 weeks. And in that 3 weeks, I got 178 ideas for contributions that people wanted to make. It completely endeared me to my campus. And the reason I'm taking a moment up front to share this with you is because this moment of profound connection to the things that the young people on campus wanted to contribute is really mind-blowing to me. It is not how I experienced university up until this point. of never having bothered to ask, what is it you want to do in the world? And getting them to answer authentically and honoring that. And over the course of the 3 weeks, I could only fund up to 50 people. So I remember the day that I got 51, and I knew that there'd be somebody in this pool that I couldn't fund, but they still contributed a contribution idea. And so I share this idea with you, and this link at the bottom is to a real website. You'll laugh at its scant nature, but it is a website. I share this with you because we're about to launch again. In about a week, we're going to put up another advertisement. And at the end of the month, we're going to pick 100 people this time and give them $400 to support whatever contributions they want to make. But now we have an eye toward a question about whether contribution seeds a sense of purpose. Does contributing help build and cultivate a greater sense of purpose in the contributor? We know it has benefits for the people they're contributing to. You can read the stories of what these young people want to do, but is it of any benefit to the people who are contributing in terms of growing and cultivating a sense of purpose? That's our working idea. We built a sort of a test around that. And so this is a rare chance to watch in real time us doing a field study on people who are doing work, and is open. You'll be able to watch on this website and other social media spaces we can talk about. So as a little bit of a stage for things I want to talk about is, I think a lot about purpose in life. I care deeply about this concept, and I want to tell you about why. So over the course of the next while, if I say something that's of interest to you, that needs more unpacking, it needs more clarification, let me know, we can talk about it, or you can send me an email, we can talk elsewhere about it. If you see something of interest that I don't spend enough time with, just let me know and we can circle back to it, or we can talk later about it. But I have a lot of thoughts about purpose and its value in our lives. Part of why I believe that so strongly is, when you look at the research literature on purpose, the scholarship that's been written on purpose, it's one of the most amazing literatures, because every 2 or 3 months a paper comes out that's absolutely mind-blowing. You almost can't believe when you look at a purpose finding, it's like, this can't possibly be true. What would explain that being true? For example, you could really start anywhere, but here's an example. A couple of years back, 4 or 5 years ago, a paper was published that was conducted by a group of epidemiologists working in rural Japan. Right? So they went to a community of older adults living in Japan, and they were epidemiologists. So they were interested in the health and well-being in this community. What factors predict and maintain health and well-being over time in this particular region? And as epidemiologists, they had their typical battery of instruments. They asked questions about diet. Do you exercise? How much sleep are you getting? We want to measure BMI, body mass, all the things you might expect an epidemiologist would ask about, the factors that we think predict how well you're faring and how healthy you're going to be, right? And they followed these older adults over a number of years across the study. But up on their survey was an item that I think is fascinating. In addition to all those other things, they asked about ikigai. They asked them a question that translates to, do you have a reason for living? Now, that question is pretty in your face, right? Like, I don't know what you would say to that, but if somebody were to ask me walking down the street, do you have a reason for living? Like, I might go right to fight or flight mode. Like, that's an odd phrasing of that to me. But more curious than the question was the response category. They asked it in a dichotomous way. The answers were yes or no. So they asked people, do you have a reason for living, without any attempt to ascertain what that reason might be? It's just a yes or no question. Now, the one feature I should say of the study is they followed older adults for a number of years. And one of the unfortunate byproducts of this kind of longitudinal work is older adults passed away. It's an unfortunate byproduct of doing work with this age group. But savvy researchers can capitalize on this unfortunate reality and try to glean information about what do we know about the people who've passed away? What did they tell us when we had access to them about their lives that might predict whether they were here or not? Right. So to jump to the punchline, what they showed is that compared to those older adults who said yes to the question, I have a reason for living, right? Compared to those who said yes, those who said no to the question, upwards of twice as likely to have passed away over the course of the study. This is a 4-year study, by the way. So 4 years later, they were 2 times as likely to have passed away. Now, these are older adults, but this question, that's an amazing question You can ask me something with a dichotomous answer, and that answer actually predicts the likelihood that I'm here 4 years later. And it's not just a corner of the data, right? Almost everywhere you look in it, those who are the youngest in the sample, those who are the oldest in the sample, those with the most resources in terms of income, fewest resources, those who said they have scored higher on depressive symptoms, the pattern was there. This, from a social scientific perspective, is fascinating because we know things predict longevity. Smoking, not exercising, eating certain kinds of food, well, even controlling for those things are in the model. But above and beyond them, knowing whether a person says yes or no to this question predicts longevity, predicted the likelihood of being alive just 4 years later. That's an amazing commentary or sort of indictment of purpose. I would hold it up as a kind of context for the research that I and my colleagues work on, is how can that possibly be true, right? And it's not just a one-off. When you look at the research literature, findings like this have been around for about a decade. A little bit over a decade ago, Neil Krauss did the same thing. He wrote a paper called Meaning in Life and Mortality, but he actually, read the paper, he actually measured purpose in life. Greater sense of purpose predicted longevity. Lower purpose predicts a greater risk of mortality. I can point to maybe 10 to 12 other papers that show the exact same thing, 2 of which have come out this year. We're only in February. 2 of these come out this year saying, linking a greater sense of purpose in life with how long we live, with greater and greater sophistication. Interestingly, my colleague Pat Hill at Washington University in St. Louis shows this effect isn't just a story of later in life, even earlier in life. Even people in young adulthood, middle adulthood, you still see the same effect. I don't know what I might say today that might be compelling to you, but this is a compelling insight to me that I don't know what more I could say about the value of purpose other than it links to longevity and predicts how long we actually live. But maybe that's not of interest to you. Maybe we need to move away from longevity. Well, what about some of these things? People with a greater sense of purpose have lower risk of developing Alzheimer's and less risk of cognitive decline as they age, a lower risk of stroke, lower incidence of sleep disturbance. We know increasingly how important sleep is. People with a greater sense of purpose have lower risk of major cardiovascular events. People like me with an irregular heartbeat, purposeful people's hearts skip fewer beats over the course of a day. Like things that are actually a little confusing to even imagine how that could be true. Purposeful people recover faster after surgery. They have fewer somatic symptoms. So they're less likely to report things like headaches and stomach aches than the rest of us. It's almost like purpose gets embodied. And maybe why purpose people are living longer is because they actually enjoy a better health profile. So maybe this is a question of mechanisms, that purpose is good for you because it actually associates with a better overall health profile. This is where I think the cutting edge of purpose research really is looking at sort of the mechanistic value of having a sense of purpose. How is purpose showing up under the skin? It's one thing to say I have a reason for living, but what is the actual signature of that in terms of your health and well-being profile? Maybe you don't care about those things, right? So maybe longevity is not your thing. So it's not mortality, it's not morbidity, it's something else we care about. Well, maybe something here. This is where my colleagues and I have kicked into the story is we've done a lot of work on flourishing. Essentially what we mean by this is that purposeful individuals actually enjoy an abundance of positive things to negative things. So it is not that purposeful people don't experience stress, don't experience hardship or challenge. They do. But when they experience those things, they also experience an abundance of the good stuff. The flourishing is an idea that suggests that it's a good life is not avoiding stress. It's able to capitalize on it and also optimize the day that you're having here. So let me give you an example. Purposeful individuals report greater positive emotion or affect and less negative affect. They feel better. Purposeful people are happier. We call this subjective well-being, but essentially life satisfaction. Purposeful individuals essentially tell you things are pretty good for them, right? Purposeful individuals are more generative. They're thinking about what they can do for others. This is a segue to our contribution project. Why we think those things might be related. We're essentially testing the other causal direction. Is contributing, giving rise to purpose is an open question, and that's why we're asking it that way. Maybe you don't care about psychological variables. What about income? What about money? Do you care about, is money a thing for you? Purposeful individuals make more of it annually and over the course of their life. It's almost like it's like there's a I don't know, like in sickness and health, but there's a wealth component of that. Purposeful individuals actually are wealthier in a year and over time. They're less impulsive. I think those things actually go together. The insight here is that purposeful individuals are playing the long game. They're not grasping at shiny objects. They're thinking about themselves in the future, and they're making investments in that future self. They're more hopeful, meaning they think of the will and the way. They're thinking about, I can actually do this. I'm going to figure out how to do this. Maybe this is of interest to folks here. Purposeful individuals seem to reap benefits even in learning contexts, like explicit learning contexts. A colleague, David Yeager at Texas, has shown purposeful youth, when given a chance to reflect on their sense of purpose, even for a few minutes, just to write it down into a few ideas, they actually are more likely to engage with boring tasks, academic tasks, things that they nominate as like boring homework. They're more willing to engage and for longer in those tasks. It's like, I don't know the relevance of this now, but I'm thinking of myself in the future, and that future me may need this. We've played a lot with that idea in the context of 4-H. When we give 4-Hers a chance to write about their purpose, they're more willing to go through 4-H educational activities, and they spend more time and engage more deeply in those activities. Purposeful individuals can visually and physically navigate environments. It's almost like the direction that gets conjured with purpose is real. Purposeful individuals can actually get from point A to point B on a map or on a landscape faster and in fewer steps. Like, how is that happening? How is purpose helping you navigate actual landscapes? It's an amazing sort of commentary. More recently, we looked at vaccine willingness. I'm sorry to go through these so slowly, but maybe there's something here of interest to folks. But we've done some kind of vaccine willingness. This was actually pre-vaccine availability. So you have to imagine a time when there weren't even COVID-19 vaccines available. We asked, if there were one, would you get one? Purposeful individuals were much more likely to say yes, they would get one. It's not a political commentary on vaccines. There's something about that they perceive as helpful for the person they want to be, right? And when you ask why that's true, they want to return to a life that they can more deeply engage in. So the investment in health story is so consistent there. It's amazing I've gotten this far into the conversation, and I should apologize for that without having defined what purpose is. I'm talking as if we all kind of have a shared definition. Even within the psychological literature, definitions vary. What purpose is might depend on who you ask. But I'm going to provide sort of a middle of the road definition just to sort of give us a common stage to stand on here and to make sure we know kind of have something common in mind. My colleagues, Patrick Knight and Todd Kashtan, have defined purpose as a central self-organizing life aim that organizes and stimulates goals, manages behaviors, and provides a sense of meaning. It's kind of a wordy definition, but let's kind of think about this. It's a self-organizing life aim. A purpose is in itself not a goal. We think of goals as terminal. You can accomplish a goal. My goal is to graduate. My goal is to buy a house. They have a finite element to them. You can accomplish those things. A purpose is an organizer of goals. It's the thing that when you accomplish the goal, what are you going to do next? A goal doesn't automatically reveal what is the next step. A purpose does that. So you think of purpose sort of a higher order construct than even goals. It's prospective. It's a life aim. Even when you arrive at something, it's the intentionality. It's still the forward-looking gaze. Okay, so it's not just, hey, I want to get this thing done and I'm done. It's even when I arrive at what I used to want to do, I'm still looking ahead from there. So I don't know. Rather than graduating, I want to be a better father. I can't accomplish that. I can demonstrate it. I can enact it at times, but I've never done doing that. I always got to work on that. And that's kind of what we think about this in this way. So think about it this way. My students, this doesn't work for them, but I think of purpose as a trapper keeper. I don't know if anybody here remembers those, but a gigantic folder with folders inside of it. Like, it's a cool thing. And it even has like transformers on the front. It has something that's more you. It's a folder of folders. And I think of purpose very much in that sort of way. Purpose, they go on to say, directs life goals and daily decisions by guiding the use of finite personal resources. I think this is really insightful. I'm taking a moment here because they write a lot about optimal resource allocation. With a sense of purpose, we can more optimally allocate our limited resources, time, energy, sleep, whatever it might, money. We only have a certain amount of those things. With a purpose, I know how to allocate those, how to spend those not on everything, on the thing that gets me to where I'm going. You can see the value of that. The potential utility of purpose is I don't have to spend my money collecting all these experiences. I can spend it on the ones that are actually relevant to where I'm heading. If you don't have that heading, you're spending things that might be useful, might be less useful, right? It's a less efficient way to go about things, perhaps. I'll close by saying that they write, instead of governing behavior, purpose offers direction, just as a compass offers direction to a navigator. I like this metaphor. I don't know what it might work for you. It might be a lighthouse. It might be a person on a pier looking out. It could be in a fort. But I think it's important to think, how would you draw this? What does purpose look like for you? And I think the metaphor of a compass works because it reminds us everyone can hold it. It's something you can keep with you. And you don't arrive at the compass. It's always directing your steps, right? It's always telling you where north is. Whether you're going north, maybe you don't want to go north, but I'm going to avoid north because my compass is telling me not to go that direction. But it's always there directing your steps, but you never arrive at the compass. You never say, well, it's just always, wherever you are, it's always telling you what directions, which way. So that works in sort of how our conceptualization of what purpose is. If you're following me this far, if you follow this argument, right, that purpose, okay, I get it. And I think I can see how it might be helpful for people. How would you ever measure that? How would you ever assess something like purpose? The shortcut here is everything we've already talked about, all of the findings, all of the health outcomes, well-being outcomes associated with purpose are derived by asking people to self-report the extent to which they feel purposeful or feel a sense of purpose in their lives, or fill out items like this. This is Carol Riff's measure of purpose in life. In which purposeful people would endorse items like this. I enjoy making plans for the future and bringing them into reality. I'm active in carrying out the plans I set for myself, or I have a good sense of what it is I'm trying to accomplish. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you agree with these things? 5 being a lot, right? And people who are thought to have a strong sense of purpose would score higher or closer to 5. People who may have lower sense of purpose may be closer to a 1. So some people wander aimlessly through life, but I'm not one of them. It's a sense like, I know other people may be directionless, but I know where I'm going, right? And so that might be a way of thinking about it. But here's where things get interesting. So we can ask people, and we keep doing it. We keep asking people, and that's important because it honors that they have a sense of how purposeful they are. It's not just what some researcher says, a person can manufacture and report and articulate how purposeful they feel. But it gets interesting in this way. I want to show you something that might be sort of better than just telling you this. So if you can see this. So here's an image. This is a picture of Denzel Washington. He's a actor, a well-known actor. And I think by most accounts, if you read the right blogs online, you might say Denzel Washington is really attractive. I mean, he's an actor, and he's famous, and he's good, but he's actually a really attractive guy. Right? You might think that. So is this guy, right? Ryan Gosling, and interestingly, the same occupation, but an actor too. Ryan Gosling is an actor, he's also very attractive, as is Eva Mendes, an actor and very attractive. And interestingly, Ava and Ryan are actually partners, or they're like, imagine that, two like attractive people finding each other and living, like miracles can happen that attractive people. As you think about this, I'm trying to manufacture in your mind the idea of people who are attractive. Something interesting happens, and it works with anyone. So it doesn't have to be an actor. Just imagine somebody who's really attractive to you. This sort of as like a placeholder, like just like me, just for a second, like imagine, or we're looking at me and you're imagining. What's interesting is attractive people score higher on purpose in life. And there's a catchiness to that, because maybe in a visual way, it can get your attention. But I want to really make sure we understand what this means. When you look at the research literature, it's not that attractive people, go around saying, hey, I'm attractive and I have purpose. There's an implicit relationship. What I mean is that the people who the rest of us nominate as attractive, like that we all get together and say, that person is very attractive. And then we ask people to fill out purpose measures. It's those who the collective think are the most attractive who have the highest purpose scores. It's not really, by the way, I don't mean to cheapen this. It's not really about attractiveness per se. It's about what folks might call interpersonal appeal. It's a whole bundle of things like attraction or likability. This is Tyler Stillman's work, and others have actually contributed to interpersonal appeal in different ways. But essentially, purposeful people, attractive people, are viewed as more purposeful. They tend to be viewed as more likable. They have a greater potential for friendship. We want to be in conversation with attractive people, and they score higher on measures of purpose in life. So it's almost like we can see it in them. And I like to talk about this. I won't do as much today, but if this were of interest, we should talk more, because I think this might be, in my adolescence class, this is where I would break off and go on a 2-hour, monologue, even more, in lecture about why we need to care about for adolescents. Because adolescents are at a time when social dynamics, social acceptance, belonging is really coming online, peer association. They love the thumbs up or the heart on whatever, they love the social. You can imagine how having a sense of purpose could be a real resource for a young person navigating that. Because if they're up to something, others can see it. And it doesn't just expand their network, it actually deepens it. They have more nominated peers and deeper, better quality relationships. So purpose is a real big deal, full stop, and a really big deal to young people, because it can actually afford a kind of beacon that they can walk around with. We all benefit from it, but imagine a purposeful young person, what they reap the benefits, and for the amount of time they get to reap that benefit, it can really pay dividends. I'm going to take a quick excursion. I literally threw this in a couple of minutes before, because I have it. Grain of salt. Of the things I'm going to share today, this is sort of hot off the presses. So this is not published work. So if you only care about the work that is currently published, plug your ears for a second, but there's something I want to show you, because I've never seen this before. I've been thinking about this concept for 13 or 14 years, trying to study it. I've never seen data like this before until 2 weeks ago, when we got the initial results from a study we're doing, and we got a chance to look at it. And my mouth is still kind of on the ground, and someone's looking at this. We've been following adolescents. These are 14 to 18-year-olds. So kind of the transition to high school, through high school, kind of that group. And we follow them for 70 days. And we ask them a lot of questions. I mean, I have an adolescent, and I can't follow him for 7 minutes. So if I'm around each other too long, he has to go into, but to follow adolescents for 70 days, and every day we get to ask questions about their lives. The fact that they would even do that is a real honor, and we're looking into a window of them. And you should know, these are youth. These are data from about 212 youth that we followed, who are all participating in a self-driven learning program called Grip Tape. We can talk more about that. But essentially, they get to pick a topic that they want to learn. And for 10 weeks, they pursue that. Whether it's to learn how to code, learn how to build a business, design a YouTube channel, whatever it is, they pick it, build bikes, it doesn't matter. They pick the topic, and then they get supported for those 10 weeks to learn that thing. So what you're looking at here is what happens to purpose over these 70 days. Let me steal my own thunder by saying this may not be so impressive to you. It's a squiggly line, but the insight here is that purpose is not static. This is the average adolescent who was followed for 70 days. I mean, with most adolescents, we don't even bother to ask them, do you have a reason for living? What is your sense of purpose? How strong? But we asked 70 times. It's not static. The bounce here, the undulations, the oscillation you're looking at here is actually super important to us, because it means the kind of day a young person is having, the ecology they're in, the environment is in a dance with their sense of purpose. Now, what you can't see here is what we can see is what's actually predicting, what's pushing up or pushing down or keeping stable for any young people, what's actually happening. But what most people might say is either young people don't really have a sense of purpose, they're directionless. I suspect that's not true among this room. And I hope it's not, because it's not true. If you ask people, young people, and they trust you, they do report having a sense of purpose, but it moves around in relationship to other things that are happening, just like the rest of it that it might be. And I can show this across 200 youth, but it's probably worth showing you this. Here's just a sample. Here's about half of those youth. These are worm plots. I can't stand looking at these because they literally remind me of worms, but my students love producing these to both freak me out, but also look at the individual, at the heterogeneity in a sample. Any one of these boxes is one youth followed for 70 days for as much data as they gave us. There is some attrition. Some people started, but then stopped. But what you see here is it's not really a straight line for many youth. Even when they're driving their own learning, and kind of the punchline, if you invite me back next year, I don't know if I'll ever be invited back, but if I'm ever invited back, I can put this into better context for you. But the early indication here is When young people perceive an obstacle to the thing they want to learn most, that's when you see the decline. And when something opens up, there's an affordance, there's a champion, there's an environment, there's an opportunity to actually make progress. On days they make progress toward the thing they said they want to learn, you see this uptick. And so this isn't just a squiggly line, it's actually evidence that a sense of purpose is fleeting. It can be manufactured and supported, or it can be extinguished and sort of shut down. I'm not making a claim that it always needs to be this elevator upward, or always, I think life is the undulation. But I think it's important for us to see this up close, is we might be complicit. We might be an environmental affordance for how purposeful a young person feels. The questions we ask them, what we invite them to do, what we ask them to do, what we make them do, could be in dynamic interplay with how they feel. So I don't have enough publications on this yet to make a more convincing space. I'm just enjoying looking at the diversity of purposeful experiences of young people. And there's a lot more in these charts that I'm able to say today, but maybe I can share some data with you that we can come back and put this into a slightly bigger context here. I'm going to take a shortcut here. And if it doesn't work, you'll let me know. But we're after the mechanism. We're trying to figure out, why would having a sense of purpose predict longevity? Right? Why is that thing beneficial? It's cool to be able to talk about purpose and measure it, but why is that worth having? What is it doing for people? And for the past 5 or 6 years, we've just done study after study to basically show what is purpose doing in the context of stress. So without a more beautiful chart here, we can just walk through it this way, because if you follow what's happening here, I think you'll enjoy more what I show next. Essentially is, we follow people over the daily course of like the unfolding context of our daily lives. We ask you, what happened today? Tell us about the good things that happened, tell us about the bad things that happened, and we measure your sense of purpose in advance. So now we want to know, does that sense of purpose, does it shape how you're reacting to the positive and negative events in your life? So it's essentially, is purpose buying you anything? Is it shaping, is it contouring how you respond to the stressors and uplifts of your daily lives? And the cover story is this: people who have a stronger sense of purpose are less reactive to stresses. So everybody has conflicts. Everybody has, a down day. I could show you data where purposeful individuals report more stressors. Purposeful people are not lucky. They didn't just they report stressors like everybody else. But what's interesting is, when purposeful individuals report stress, like today was a stressful day, those days look like a non-stressor day for the rest of us. They're able to remain more emotionally even keel, if you follow that. So with a lower sense of purpose, when stressful days happen, it throws us off course. For people with a sense of purpose, those same days happen, but they're less thrown off course. Their negative affect or physical symptoms is more like it was before. It's not that they don't notice it, they're the ones reporting the stressor, but it's less related. It has a weaker association with how they actually feel on that day. In other words, purpose helps us remain even keel. It kind of leaves us emotionally intact. And if you look at the longevity literature, why that's important is because one predictor of how long you live is how you react to stressors. People who react more to stressors, it starts to dysregulate our systems, right? Physiological systems and affect emotional systems. So now this could be one clue. Why is purpose helpful? Is because it's helping you remain more emotionally intact, even in the context of stressful things. Okay. If you follow that, what we like to do is put that kind of story into a better context, to make it more resolved, try to understand what's happening. Well, here's a context. How about our country? We live in an increasingly diverse country. What you're looking at is a map of every county in the United States. And you'll forgive me that this map is now old. This is charting the 2000 to 2010 census. We could actually do better by giving you, although if you look at some of the trends, they look a lot like this. But what this chart shows is that the deeper blue counties are the counties that it shows greater increase in the representation of ethnic minorities in those counties. Okay, so deeper blue counties had a larger gain in the proportion of the population of ethnic minorities in that particular county. And Yes, this is now outdated because we have a 2020 census, but even if you look at 2010 to 2020 data, it looks a lot like this. Some of the counties that were growing heavily in 2010 to 0 to 10 are also those same counties that are growing in the past decade. We're living in a country where we have an opportunity to work next to, live next to, relate to people who are ethnically different than us, increasingly so. We, or some of us, may value diversity. We talk like that sometimes. This is a value to us. But you should know the research literature tells a different story. When we are around people who are different than us, I'm not just talking about ethnic diversity, any different. If I think you're different than me, I stop thinking about how I'm connected to you. When we are around people who we perceive as different, we tend to feel worse than when we're around people who we think of as similar to us, whether that's ethnicity, religious background, linguistic, hearing a different language. This is Bob Putnam's work, a sociologist at Harvard who's written extensively about this. We perceive more social capital when we perceive similarities. We don't perceive as much social capital. We don't trust people if we perceive differences. So we can value diversity, but we should probably acknowledge a potential barrier to really sinking into that. It may be harder to do that. He has a whole of, if you know Bob Putnam's work on hunkering down. When we perceive differences, we don't want to connect to people. We hunker down like a turtle and pull our hands and arms in and stop thinking about what we have in common in that way. We sort of build on this idea in this way. We did a study that looks like this. And sorry for all the words on the screen. I'll just talk us through this. So we did a study in Javier. This is back in Chicago. We invited undergraduate students into a study, and we get some basic demographic information before they start, and we split them into two groups. So 116 students, we split them into two groups. And in one group, we had them write for a few minutes about their purpose. What does it mean to have a purpose? What is your purpose, right? Where does that come from? So write for 5 minutes about that purpose. The other half was writing about the last movie they saw. What was it? Who was in that? Who was in that? And what was the plot? So you're either writing about one of these two things, right? So these are our conditions where we're actually having people think about purpose or the last movie you saw. Ostensibly, the last movie you saw was not your purpose, but we asked that question. After they wrote for 5 minutes, we walked over to the L. Loyola had a red line stop. We put them on the train. The red line runs the north-south corridor in Chicago, basically from southern Evanston area down through downtown. It's right along the coast. It goes through a lot of different neighborhoods. We rode it for 14 stops. And this wasn't random. There were 2 Loyola campuses. So these were students riding a train that they would ride daily from campus to campus. And for 14 stops, we basically said, how do you feel? Every time you get to a stop, tell us how you feel. We asked questions about distress, like I gave them a line from not at all to extremely, put an X on how distressed you feel, how nervous, how alone, how scared. We also asked some positive emotions like happy, content, excited, interested, those kinds of things. But they're reporting their mood as they're riding this train. What they were relatively unaware of is that we were keeping track of the ethnic composition of the train. So for every passenger, we had researchers on board keeping track of who all the passengers were. And because we knew the ethnic background that our participants reported, we could calculate a diversity score. So how many people on this train are of the same group that you told us you were? Now, we didn't ask passengers to tell their ethnic background. It was subjective, but no more subjective than it would have been for our participants. So you're just riding a train and there's people around kind of looking around and for 14 stops. Okay. So here's the punchline. Just like Bob Putnam predicted, when our participants were riding trains that looked more like them, the passengers were of the same group, their positive affect goes up and their negative affect goes down, compared to when the train becomes more diverse, when the train starts looking less like you. And this is across your background. So no matter what your ethnic background is, when the train looks less like that for you, negative affect or distress goes up and positive affect goes down, except as a function of our conditions. So the top line, if you're not usually looking at interaction effects, essentially, the top line is the control group. That's our movie writing condition. Everyone on that top bar, I'm colorblind, you have to figure out what color that is, but the top line there, our control condition are those individuals who wrote about the last movie they saw. They were the ones that when diversity was low, when ethnic composition of outgroup members was low, negative affect was lower, but it increased when the train became more ethnically diverse. The bottom line of those who wrote about purpose, we call it statistical flatline. You couldn't predict how they felt as a function of the diversity of the train. People were randomly assigned to these writing conditions for 5 minutes. Having reflected for 5 minutes on your purpose created a different engagement with the environment of the train. It meant that the people, the other passengers, who they were, their ethnic composition was not related to your emotional lability or bouncing around, right? Those who wrote about the last movie they saw, which we think of as sort of a generic control, they were the ones that showed this particular effect. We've shown this again with not just writing about purpose, but actually measuring sense of purpose as well. So what's interesting is even people who walk around with a greater sense of purpose showed this effect. And even given them the chance to write for 5 minutes about it shows the same effect. So you don't have to be blessed with purpose forever. Even brief engagements with this concept may afford some benefit for individuals. I want to share this because this may be of interest. Let me put this up here. Sorry, this should have been bundled. We don't just think about stress. We also think about uplifts. We did a study where we asked individuals, put this in better context. We want to know, are the benefits of purpose only present in the context of stress? That might make sense. That's why you're living longer, is because when there's stress or negative experiences, you're not really kind of experiencing them. Is that really true? We're asking that question here. So what we did is we invited students to a lab and we asked them to take a selfie. We said, we're building a beta, like we're building like a Facebook site. You have to start by posting a selfie, right? So build your selfie, take your photo, build your profile. We're going to post your photo. And while your photo's posted, you can do some other tasks. So all of these people are coming to the laboratory. They're taking a photo of themselves. Apparently selfies are super cool. People like doing this. They want to take a photo, put it up onto a website for other people to look at. And then they went on and did some other tasks. What we told them is 15 minutes later, your picture has been posted on this site for 15 minutes and it got some likes. And we either told them in the middle, you got the average likes, you get the, or you got fewer than average, or you got way more than average. So the truth is, none of these photos were actually posted online. I'm not even sure the computer was connected to the internet, but that's what they thought. And we did debrief them. So, but that was the auspices of their experiences. They thought they were building this profile and they thought these were real likes. That's what our checks affirmed that. And as you might expect, those who were told they got more likes had greater self-esteem. This is causal. Those who were told you got more likes than average, they had greater self-esteem compared to those who were told they got average or fewer than average likes. This is not probably that surprising. Hearing you're doing better than average, especially when it comes to your face, that's going to boost self-esteem. However, that effect was only there for people who scored lower on purpose in life. So before they did any of this, right, we measured their sense of purpose. And what you see, the dotted line, that's where the action is. The dotted line are those people who scored lower than their peer line. So 1 standard deviation below. They're on their measure of sense of purpose, they're scoring lower than their classmates. When they didn't get very many likes, they didn't have very high self-esteem. When they got more likes, they had higher self-esteem. People who came in with higher sense of purpose, self-esteem was statistically flatlined. You could not essentially move their level of self-esteem by telling them they got very few likes or more than average. Their self-esteem was not contingent on likes. What's interesting is when we present this to high school students and we talk with them about it, is they say, wait a second, you prevented people from reaping the benefits of those likes. And they're right, that's such a savvy observation. But we try to say, you wouldn't want that over the long haul. You don't want your self-esteem to be based upon whether somebody likes your selfie or your shirt. It's probably really cool when it happens, but the day you don't have that, your self-esteem is much lower. We call this contingent or fragile self-esteem. You want self-esteem that is secure. Independent on what's happening, you still feel good about who you are. But people with fragile self-esteem can feel good about who they are under the conditions if, right? So on and so forth. Okay, so if you follow that. The insight here is that purpose may be a resource, not just when things go poorly or are challenging, but even when things go well or are uplifting, that's important. Emotional stability is kind of the name of the game in terms of longevity and health. You don't want to dysregulate your health by bouncing through the roof when things go well or falling through the floor when things don't. When students in my class get an A in an exam, I say, don't retire. Keep doing the thing that you did to get the A, right? So just remain emotionally even keel. Celebrate a little, but not through the roof kind of thing, okay? I want to kind of wrap up by kind of mentioning a few things here. This might be relevant if this is of interest. Of course, some of our work feels relevant to us, to the pandemic in a lot of different ways, and we're moving in this a couple of different directions. There's some core questions about what happens to purpose in a pandemic. Some of the social contingencies of purpose get challenged, right? What happens if I can't go to work, I can't go to school and be around people who actually imbue my life with purpose? There's some severe questions awaiting answers about what even happens to the sense of purpose in a pandemic when some of the social networks or interactions that we come to rely on that actually gave rise to it start to dissipate or become less sort of accessible, right? So we've been thinking about this for different kinds of populations, different kinds of communities, and thinking our way through what is purpose doing in a pandemic, right? Kind of thinking, and how well can people manage the things they most find engaging when they can't engage in some of those things before. So we're kind of unpacking it. So I have some things to say about that, if that's a conversation we want to have. I will just show you one sort of piece here, which is, if you follow the story, what I've said so far is basically that in typical assessments, what we generally have found, study after study, is that purpose helps keep people even keel when stressors happen or when positive things happen, right? So, on days when you report a lot of stress, purposeful people fare better because they may report stress, but their emotion looks like a non-stressful day. What we show here is that purpose, even in the pandemic, is still doing that when it comes to positive events, okay? So the good things that happen since the onset of the pandemic, they're still not bouncing through the roof, right? Purpose still seems to attenuate how great we think it is. So purposeful people don't blow positive days through the roof, even in the pandemic. And I know that might sound counterintuitive, but it's actually really important. So it doesn't become a hyperbole for them. It's like, oh, this is the best day ever. They keep it in sort of range. And over time, that bodes well for health and well-being. And so what we've seen in the before times is still happening even in the context of the pandemic when it comes to positive experiences. But it's not happening when it comes to negative experiences. And so the way of talking about this is, if you're not looking at regression slopes, is that when it comes to stressors or negative events or hassles, purpose in the pandemic may actually exacerbate how those stressors feel for purposeful people. Maybe a bit redundant. Let me say it a different way, is that in the pandemic, if you're purposeful, stressful days can sting more. It can hurt worse. I think what we're seeing is that purposeful individuals who are the ones who really want to get out and do something, to engage meaningfully with life, to manage behaviors, one additional stressor, 2 or 3 additional stressors comes at a bigger cost for them. They may be really struggling in the context of a pandemic compared to those that may not have a real strong sense of purpose, right? Because maybe a pandemic, okay, I wasn't planning to do a lot today. So, but people who were planning to do a lot, who had an intention, an aim, we might see them struggling a bit more in the context of a pandemic. So that might be one sort of insight to interpret, is like, I would, with a grain of salt, this needs more work. We don't have enough distance from the pandemic to really understand it. Is this a blip or is this a pattern? We'll detect that as we go through, but it might mean this thing that we've been talking about, purpose is this resource. It might actually be a source of vulnerability in the context of the pandemic, but as we go through, but that needs a little bit more. Let me wrap this up so we can get to either Q&A and our thoughts or reactions or tomatoes, if you want to throw those virtually. I'll be there for that too. A couple of thoughts. A sense of purpose appears to be an asset for those who possess it. Where we've looked for it, purpose seems to be a benefit. The main effects, the direct effects, still keep showing up even in the context of the pandemic. It's like purpose is kind of like money. It's a resource. It's probably worth having. And if you don't have a lot of it, cultivate more of it. There's been nothing in the pandemic that suggests that's not true, that it's probably worth having more of that resource. which makes it a little odd to me, and I'm biased, that we don't talk more about this. I hear there's a lot of talk about money and a lot of talk about sleep and healthy food. I would put purpose on that list, and it would be neat to hear more conversations about how we can be a part of building purpose in ourselves and other people. I think it would be cool to have that conversation. Purpose appears to mitigate reactivity to stressors and uplifts by conferring psychological homeostasis. This is just jargon. Basically, it keeps us even keel. You don't want to be all over the place. You kind of want to be your normal, your typical. When you start to deviate from your norm, you're dysregulating the systems that got you there, and you kind of want to keep those in tow. I would say there may be the grumblings of some evidence that would be really cool to keep following up with to see if this benefit that we see as robust actually holds up in really extreme circumstances. And I would nominate the global pandemic as an extreme circumstance. Is there an environment, can we actually find the limits of this? Is in certain environments, this cool resource can come at a cost to you, just like money. Is there any environment in which maybe so much money is actually working against you? There may be something where if you're so goal-oriented and prospective, and there's so many hurdles, that goal orientation could potentially come at a cost to you. And I think it's worth acknowledging that, so I don't sound like I'm writing a commercial for purpose. I think we need to kind of temper where are the boundaries of this thing as we go through. I'll close with this slide and hope that it sparks a provocation to think about this. I made it this far through the talk without actually focusing at all about content. We're doing a lot more of this, and so in some ways it's a shame I didn't say more, because I think this is a really exciting area for me to learn more about, and our lab is doing some of this. But are all purposes worth having? In other words, are the benefits of purpose that I've enumerated and have been shown up in the literature for so long the same across any kind of purpose that a person's pursuing? The honest answer from the research literature, the careful answer is we don't know, but it would be worth thinking about that. Does it matter what your reason for living is? Does it matter what your intention is? Dr. King spoke about, I actually would hold Dr. King up as the ultimate view of purpose or definition of purpose of a dream, the metaphor of a dream. The thing he was aspiring to do was literally not here. It was manufactured through the language of a dream, right? So the world as it is wasn't enough. It had to be dreamed about in his view. And so is that the kind of purpose? It's got to be so aspirational, it can only be conjured through a dream. And what are the costs of that? I mean, I don't pretend to know his mental health profile. That's not my aim here. But did that come? We know in terms of his outcome, his demise, it came at a severe cost to him to pursue that. Mae Jemison, Dr. Mae Jemison, a Cornell grad, first Black woman in space. Her dream is Starship 3000, right? She told us her purpose is to get to the next star. How ambitious, like Alpha Centauri, we don't even have the tools today on Earth to do that, right? And yet that's her dream, because she wants to learn what will we learn about ourselves as we try to pursue that. Right. And so having a purpose that is so aspirational, is that what it's about? What about something that we can actually do? I can actually push on legislation. I can actually design an organization to empower young people to code. Right. And I showed Darth Vader in the middle. One, I'm a Star Wars fan, but also what about purposes that we might deem as nefarious or deleterious or harmful? Their literature would call it ignoble. What about young people who want to do something that we don't think is super helpful? If I'm trying to save the planet, I should tell everybody I need as much help as I can get. If I'm trying to destroy it, I may only tell 3 people in my garage. Would that matter in terms of my health profile? I mean this as a provocation, because a lot of my colleagues would say, of course it matters. Good purposes are the ones we want to build. What I might argue is we need to look at the signature. You could make an argument that a young person pursuing something that might be deemed negative, bad, or problematic might actually be reaping the same benefits in self-esteem and positive affect and life satisfaction as people who are doing things that we actually find more admirable. So if that's true, there's a real puzzle for us to think. is how are we going to extinguish purposes that are harmful when they're coming as a benefit to the people who are pursuing them? So I just end you with that sort of provocation. I need to thank a bunch of people more than show up here, but my lab, the students who helped me think through about this, my colleagues who helped me think it through, the communities we work with that ask better questions than we started with. There's just a bunch of people who funded the work and support the work without funding in a lot of ways, and I want to thank them. And my mom would be upset if I didn't end by thanking you. So thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions or field feedback that you might have. Thank you.
Anthony, can you stop sharing real quick? I just want to make sure everybody gets
Absolutely.
a chance to get on screen here with you.
Stop. Hopefully that stopped it.
There we go. So for those of us who are still here, would you mind unblocking your camera real quick? Just real quick, and you can go back to whatever you're doing. Just so I could see faces. And show a little love to Anthony for his presentation. That was really, really good. I just really want to thank you, Anthony, for sharing that insight. That's really, really good. There was a comment you made about coming back next year. I think I might have you come back next year. You're going to actually regret saying that. So, so with that said, so we have some time here, a little bit of time for some questions for folks that are interested in actually listening. So, Anthony, we had a couple questions in the chat room here, or in the chat box here. First question was from Jill Baker. She asks us, have you looked at purpose as it relates to suicide ideations or attempts or fatalities?
So I'm trying to find the question. Maybe I'm not looking at, maybe I have a different list of these things, but let me ask a clarifying question. Is this a question about whether purpose in life or a sense of purpose in life is associated with suicidal ideation and or attempts?
Jill?
Yeah, I guess more about protective factors. So I'm a parent of a student in GAPS, but also I work in suicide prevention and as my real job. Not that parenting is not a real job. It is a real job. And so anyway, we often talk about risk and protective factors. And I wondered if any of your work had intersected with that around whether or not a stated sense of purpose or like the amount of a stated sense of purpose. That I felt a little confused about that too, correlated with that emotional stability you talked about, which is protective against suicide.
Yeah, wonderful question. To respond to this, I don't know if you'll count this as an answer, but to respond to it, I'm not recruiting my own research, just research others have done that I'm familiar with. A couple of pathways here. There is direct evidence of the relationship that a stronger sense of purpose. So if this was confusing, my apologies for that. People who endorse items like, in some cases, they say, I have a clear purpose, so it's explicit, like purpose is in the question. You know, I engage in meaningful activities. I have a clear sense of direction. When I say a greater sense of purpose, I mean greater endorsement or agreement with that kind of question or item. So a greater sense of purpose has been shown pretty reliably to correlate with less suicidal ideation and suicide attempts. There's direct evidence of people asking that question. The mechanism questions get interesting. They're still in the same direction. So if you think about the definition of purpose is an intentionality, I don't pretend to know all of the pathways, but one of the signatures of suicidal ideation is difficulty imagining oneself in the future and imagining sort of a narrowing of one's role in the future. So it's a burden, I'm only going to burden others, and it's hard for me to imagine sticking around. Things aren't going to get better than they are. That's sort of antithetical to purpose. Purposeful people kind of feel like they must be better, and what I'm going to do is going to be sort of relevant to that. So it's almost like you can see why there's such a strong negative correlation, inverse relationship, because purposeful people are actually imputing themselves in the future. Right? I have a dream of this happening, and I'm here today because I'm trying to breathe that dream into reality. And so it's a simple answer, and I think your questions actually begs a much more complex. But I think we need to know more about this, but the psychological experience of purpose appears to sort of equip individuals with what people who might be contemplating or ideating about suicide might be struggling with, is just the ability to imagine themselves in the future that's positive and constructive and generative. Whereas that is sort of the signature of purpose. They're like, this has to get better, therefore I'm here and let's go.
Maybe we can connect. I asked Javier to connect us offline also, because I would love to hear more about, in my work as a school counselor with adolescents, that I think the volatility of purpose is probably more profound in adolescence than other times of life, would be my guess. And so how does that all play in? And anyway, so I'm counting on Javier to connect us.
Absolutely.
Javier tracked me down after 13 years. So he's the person to find me if you're looking for me.
Only because other people told me where you're at.
Okay.
Okay. That's my first thing, is ask my friends who know where other people are at. That's my first thing. The second, any comments or reactions from those who listen to some of this? Actually, I have one, maybe one, Anthony, is, one of those things that I think students struggle with right now, especially those kids that are in the middle school age group, is having a hard time trying to self-regulate. They're trying to get back into school, and they've lost basically 2 years of really socialization, and trying to self-regulate. And there's a lot of the issues that we've had with insults and bullying and violation of space and things of that sort. And I find myself wondering about your research and reading a little bit about what you've been doing, how we have conversations with young people in those stages of life where they're struggling, trying to find themselves in such a different place with the pandemic, right? Do you have any tips or guidance for any teachers or any of those of us who are working with young people that actually help mitigate some of those instances?
This is such an important question. I'm pausing because of the gravity of it. I'm aware of some evidence that fully backs what you're saying, and I'm aware of it anecdotally as a parent. And I at risk of just not doing my job, I just want to say I'm humbled by even the idea of giving tips or guidance to teachers who do the work. I would reframe it as, I want to share a thought or two. And to the extent that you know better or already doing better, hopefully this isn't insulting that I would even dare offer this, but, I've connected to programs or elements of programs that do where I opened with, by engaging young people with a question about who they are. So let me say the quiet part out loud is, purpose for young people may not be easy if they don't know who they are. It's hard to know if I say, where are you going, right? Or do you have a reason for living? The basic purpose question. The you in that question is really important. So if you don't have that, if you're not doing the identity work, the self-exploration, I'm here to say that could actually not just be a difficult thing to answer, it could actually be frustrating for young people. So we may owe it to them to help them do some identity work. And that's why the Contribution Project, that's why Grip Tape, programs that begin with, who are you? What are you interested in? What are your values? Practice that. And not only, I'm not just asking, I'm honestly here for the answer. I can't believe it's taken me 15 years of teaching college students. I mean, I work with college students who are bright people. And I walked in every day with a syllabus and said, here's what you're going to learn today. I jump in as if I know so much what you need to learn. And I even have a script for it. And I never bothered to ask, what are you going to do with this information? Where are you going? I teach 310 college students on adolescence. I now stop before, what is your path? Who are you? And we spend time with that in two ways. One, it provides a container for them to hear the lecture. If you're thinking about your direction, maybe you're more engaged with what I'm about to say. But I also want to honor what they might find meaningful in this. And I don't see a lot of that. And no suggestion that you're not doing it. But I don't think structurally, systemically, we've built in a way of meaningfully hearing what young people want to tell us, and then using that to actually share information. Like we're going to actually, what is the thing you want to do most? We're going to learn about that. And I don't know what the insight is there, because I suspect that does not translate well to all environments and all contexts. But I just don't think we've exhausted that yet, is actually hearing for young people, putting them in the driver's seat. Because where I've seen that, what might not have been clear from the bouncing around line is grip tapers or grip tape challengers, the young people who direct their own learning. Those are some purposeful young people, because we're engaging them with the thing they want to do most. We're already starting with a person who's thinking about themselves in the future, rather than listening to me drone on about what I think they need to know. So maybe we should just kind of chip away at that more and more. Like starting with what is it you care most about? And maybe that's an important framework for engaging one another. I'll learn something, you'll learn something. And that doesn't translate easily, but there's something there that I don't think we've exhausted.
And probably the answers probably are what's most important, is the listening aspect, to actually be thoroughly engaged. That's one of the things that I took away from what you just mentioned, is to actually take the time. Because, you know, there's some people who want a simple answer to how you're doing, or what are you up to, or who are you? You got to be willing to sit there and engage with somebody when you actually do that, right? Not superficially.
Right. There's research that asks young people to write about their purpose for a little bit. And although that's helpful for engagement, where you can maximize it is when an educator responds to it, actually writes, and this might be important, a handwritten note. I've read that, I get what you want to do, and here's why the math lesson that we're going to have this week could help you in that. So there's an insight there that I don't know that we'll have the bandwidth to do that all the time, but that might be closer to what it looks like to listen. Is I've asked you a question and I honor your answer, and I'm able to think through how what I want to teach you is relevant to that thing that you want to learn. It would be neat to see that in greater practice and put it to the test. Did it work? And some things young people want to learn, I'm not the person they need to hear from. I don't know how to do any of that. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like we could listen and then try to respond to young people as part of our arsenal for helping young people through what seems to be a really difficult time that they're in.
Really good. I'm going to leave it to our audience here for the last maybe one or two questions before Anthony gets back to his evening. Who here has any additional questions for Anthony, or any kind of like clarifying thing? Yeah, go ahead, Heather.
Yeah, I have one, kind of going back to your Darth Vader example, and it's not necessarily like a nefarious purpose, but I'm thinking about students who maybe have an unhealthy purpose, like they think it's their responsibility to make someone else happy. You know, is there a way to make that more productive or change that mindset?
So a couple of things. That's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. I want to know a couple of things. I'm hearing the heart of the question, and allow me to think my way through this. Is before I jump to the answer of like changing that, I'd want to know, is it actually helpful to them to have that purpose? If I go to the end, I say, no, you said it's not helpful. But when I look at purposeful people engaging their resources in something, I'm wondering what they get out of that. And it makes me wonder, what is the affordance? What is the environmental feature that makes pursuing that, trying to make somebody happy? Like, it might be something that works for them. And when that happens, we might want to be careful about dismantling that, because other things can come with it when we do. But assuming all the safeguards and thought has gone into that, is like, what do we want to change in young people, and why would we want to do it? And we have arrived at, the young person even agrees, this is not helpful, right? I think one thing might be to explore that with them, is a strong sense of purpose should be correlated with greater health and well-being. But you're coming in tired. You're actually coming in not satisfied with your life. And if you can show that, you might be able to show the signature is when you found a purpose that's really resonating, you reap these benefits. But do we think that's happening? But I think without a better answer, I think your question is what is part of one of the studies we're kind of working on in the lab is, I think sometimes what's hard to extinguish in an unhealthy purpose is because that person is reaping all the benefits of purpose. And so now we know what we're up against is of course, stop doing that behavior we don't like. But that behavior we don't like is coming at a huge benefit to them. And it's really hard to extinguish something that's coming at a benefit to somebody. So it's like, we got to really know all the strings beneath the things they're doing, and then maybe work around some of those strings. Like you could have all the happiness and joy and generativity, but maybe we should do this because it's hurting that crowd or it's hurting you over here. But if nothing else, it might be a way of engaging a conversation with a young person, of taking a look at it. The language of purpose itself might be a new way to engage young people, to kind of move the needle. Like one of the most common responses we get in our studies is, I've never been asked that question before. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about purpose, do a lot of debriefing after the fact with Cornell students. You mean you're at Cornell and nobody's ever asked you what is your purpose? So even being asked a question and talking about it can be such a context for meaningful engagement with young people.
That is really good.
I have a question. I'm sorry, I'm driving.
That's okay, Ramicia. Pay attention to the road. Go ahead and ask your question, Ramicia. We're going to end with your question.
I just have a question. My question is, do you think that purpose is correlated with spirituality? Because as a person of faith, we often talk about purpose. And as I put in the chat, someone once said, a title is good, but purpose is better. And a lot of people think, am I walking in my purpose? Am I living in my purpose? Am I being activated in my purpose from a faith standpoint?
Thank you for this question. Because I'm going to use it to respond in two ways. So in our work, people should do with this what they will. In our work, a religious purpose is but one kind of purpose. It's as powerful, meaningful. People who own that reap the same benefits that I was just talking about, but it's just a shroud. I don't mean to say just. It is a shroud that gets wrapped around purpose, where somebody could have a religious purpose, other people have an occupational purpose, an athletic or artistic. It is one popular bundle of purposes that is sort of religious. But a commentary on that. One is, it seems to be a really profound kind of purpose. Short of the Bible, I think you can do the Google Analytics and find this, but I think one of the best-selling books short of the Bible is a book by Rick Warren called A Purpose-Driven Life, where he entertains this, that you should be living a life of purpose that's in accordance, like it's ordained. With you find or cultivate your religious purpose, what is life, how it's meant for you, and you'll reap benefits. So that has a lot of traction for people. It's a popular idea if you look at book sales about what people like to connect with. But it raises a really important point. I'll leave you with this point because I think I didn't talk much about this, but we should have. I should have talked more about this, which is, I hear a lot of talk about finding purpose. It's woven into our social media. You see memes, you see book titles like find purpose. The word find is like part of what we mean by purpose. But I don't see any evidence that finding it is actually how we acquire purpose. I'm not saying it's not, but it's like finding a tomato. Like, you grow a tomato, you cultivate that, you have to garden that. That to me is more how I think about purpose. It's the work you're putting into it. And why I share that is because when we've done studies on purpose acquisition beliefs, a fancy way of saying, how do you think you arrive or acquire purpose? And the punchline to all this is, people who say a purpose is up to them, they perceive control. Whether or not I have purpose is because I'm either going to find it, build it, cultivate it. It's up to me. When they have purpose, they do the best. But if they don't have purpose, it comes at a big cost. If purpose is findable and you don't have it, it's your fault. Where religious purposes, when it's ordained, my purpose is given to me, it's bestowed upon me, it's ordained by a higher power, the contingencies of purpose appear to be weaker or less. Whether you have it or not is sort of co-owned by the entities that would imbue it. So it's an interesting sort of twist. It's like having a religious purpose can be extremely powerful to people. But if you think that's how we come to purpose is through religion, it seems to be not having purpose is still okay, because you can eventually get it. It can be bestowed to you. But people who don't believe in that, they think whether I have purpose is I have to find it. It's up to me. It's out in the world and I have to go find it. If they have it, they do the best. If they don't have it, do the worst, because it's them. It's all on them. And so religious purposes are a very common kind of purpose, and it seems to be really beneficial to people who have it. But if they don't have it, some of the contingencies of not having it can be weaker or less. So it's a really interesting, sorry to derail the question, but it raises a lot in my mind.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thanks, Javi, for letting me get in that in.
Don't crash your car,
Drive
Ramesia.
safe.
Pay attention.
Yeah, please.
Ramesia, because I need you to
I got
come
my
back.
eyes on the road.
Yeah, because Ramesia, this actually says a nice segue, because Ramesia is our next, Dr. Ramesia McGee, who just asked that last question. She'll be our next speaker on February 16th on at the same time, same bad channel. She'll be doing a presentation on Black achievement and Black excellence. And so I'm really happy about that. So Dr. Burrow, Anthony, really, man, thank you so much. I really, really value the fact that you volunteered your time today and wanted to share what you're doing. It has been phenomenally interesting, and I'm really, really, truly honored and blessed to have you actually do this for us. Thank you.
Thank you kindly for the invitation. It was nice to be here. I appreciate the Q&A. Javier, you have my email. Please share it with anybody who might have a follow-up.
Yep, will do. Absolutely. So if anybody wants it, just let me know. Send me an email. I'll make sure you all get Dr. Burrow's contact info. Again, Anthony, you're free to go to do your things now for the evening over there on the East Coast. Be well, stay warm, don't freeze.
Yeah, I need all that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, my
Take
man.
care, everybody.
All right, see you.
All right, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.